So I wanted to start off with the stats that I've seen around cancer when I was doing this research, which shocked me, which is that in the 1990s, we had 1 in 4 people that were to develop cancer. And today that's changed to 1 in 2. What has been going on given that we've had a improvement in science, we've had advancements in technology, we're flying people to space, but yet at the same time, we're doubling the cancer rates. What went wrong here?
Yeah, well, a lot of things went wrong. But that's interesting that you mentioned that because the National Cancer Institute, the American Cancer Society publishes a big paper every year on cancer rates, on the number of new cases and the number of deaths that are projected to occur over the previous or the coming year. And and you're absolutely right. The number of new cases has increased dramatically. I think this in 2024 they estimated and found over 2 million in the United States, with almost 612,000 deaths, and this comes from the American Cancer Society, as I said. And if you take this 600, it's like 611,000 some odd number, and if you take that number and divide it by 365 days, you get about almost 1,700 people a day are dying from cancer, approximately, when you take that bigger number. And then if you divide that number, about 1,700, by 24, you get the approximate number of people dying from cancer each day in the United States. And that comes to just about 70 people per hour are dying from cancer in the United States. Now, what is interesting from the number that you gave me is that the American Cancer Society is telling all of us that we've made tremendous progress in managing cancer. And I would say, they say, well, we've reduced cancer deaths by 33%, giving the impression that we're making major advances. In the early 1990s, the anti-smoking campaigns were initiated. And gradually, more and more people stopped smoking because of peer pressure. Secondary smoke was bothering me and putting me at risk. Therefore, you better stop smoking. So gradually, peer pressure in the society started to reduce smoking. And smoking was a major risk factor for developing cancer. So if people stopped smoking, they projected that if our population did not stop smoking in the 1990s, we would have 33% more dead people than if we stopped smoking. So the major improvement in cancer was all prevention. It had very little, if anything, to do with new drugs, new therapies, or any of this kind of stuff. So I look at it this way. And people can take it in different ways. President Nixon in 1971 declared war on cancer. When we declare war and we look at casualties in war, we count bodies and dead people and casualties and things like this. We don't say, oh, we had a particular engagement in Afghanistan and we had 36 people die per 100,000. It's absurd. So when you look at 1,700 people a day dying from cancer, that's a number. That's a number of souls gone from the planet. We don't divide it by per 100,000 people or per numbers of population. We look at it as dead people. So are we making any advances in cancer? Only in the prevention aspect. And now we understand from new data that the obesity epidemic is starting to replace smoking as a major risk factor for developing cancer. So we're replacing one risk factor with another risk factor. And you're right, cancer is dramatically increasing. and we're not making any major progress regardless. All you have to do is look at the numbers of dead people. We don't see we're seeing 500 people less per year dying than the last year or something like this. We just see constant, almost continuous increase in people dying from cancer. Now, if that's, which is horrific, and it's like 20 million worldwide are dying from cancer. I mean, it's not just the United States. In China, I saw a report where they said 8,100 people a day are dying from cancer in China. They have a much larger population, obviously, but you still have a lot of people dying in every country, every advanced country that we are. And not everybody collects accurate data, but the problem is, yes, it's getting worse. And the pharmaceutical industries are planning to have even more and more cancer dead people by 2050. This is absurd. This shouldn't happen. We can drop those death rates significantly once we realize that it's a metabolic disease and not a genetic disease. So the reason why we're not making any major advances is because the National Cancer Institute says that cancer is a genetic disease. Nothing could be further from the truth. I don't know who writes those things. They obviously don't read the scientific literature or even understand it, because cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease. And we've defined what's driving the fuels driving the dysregulated growth. And we've developed therapies and strategies that can restrict those fuels and thereby kill tumor cells without killing the patient. So the problem is the whole entire field is brainwashed into this idea that cancer is a genetic disease. And as long as that's happening, you're not going to make any major progress.
Yeah, I remember, growing up, my parents, or as we were learning about cancer and the deaths that could arise, is to constantly check for people in your family or your ancestors that might have had certain types of cancer, right, related to, let's say, even heart disease. And then based on that, you want to, try to prevent it as much as possible. So I grew up, and a lot of people, I think, grow up thinking that genetic mutation and the history behind your ancestors is what determines like a large portion of why you would get cancer rather than lifestyle. But when you're talking about this misunderstanding that we have about cancer and the fact that it's not based on primarily genetic mutation, but it's actually around the mitochondria, what does that change about how we treated cancer, if assuming that we were thinking that it's genetic mutation versus what you're saying, which is based on mitochondrial?
Yeah, well, let me go back and say why people thought that it was genetic. Oh, it runs in the family. Some kind of cancer might run in the family. Therefore, people sometimes assume that there's a genetic risk factor. And in some cases, it is. We know there are some inherited risk factors that none of them are perfect, so they're secondary risk factors. But a lot of those families live in a common environment as well. And the common environment could be impacting. In other words, the members of that family develop cancer because they have provocative cancer causing agents in that same environment, whether it's a food-borne or chemical-borne or whatever it is. Sometimes, so you misinterpret what you're seeing. Yes, it runs in families because families are being exposed to the same common environment. And there are genetic risk factors, don't get me wrong, but none of them are 100% penetrant, meaning they're secondary. And all of the ones that we have studied, the genetic so-called germline mutations, every one of them affects the mitochondria in one way or another, making mitochondrial dysfunction the prime cause of cancer. And it's once you know what the prime cause is, then you immediately know what the therapies are to manage it. But when you realize that the oncogenic paradox was put out by Albert Szent-Györgyi, a Nobel Prize guy, who said that there seems to be so many different provocative agents that could precipitate cancer. But what is the common pathophysiological mechanism that could link all of these different provocative agents? For example, chemical carcinogens. A chemical is called a carcinogen because it's been linked to the formation of cancer. Radiation exposure. People fear radiation because they say you could get cancer from it. Intermittent hypoxia, like from sleep apnea. systemic inflammation that's often seen in people with diabetes and obesity, oncogenic viruses. There are papillomaviruses, hepatitis C viruses, a variety of viruses that are linked to the formation of cancer, of being older, a genetic germline risk factors. So what was stumbling to the field, even to Sid Mukherjee, who wrote The Emperor of All Maladies, which is a New York Times bestseller, a Pulitzer Prize book. He struggled with this. He said, what is the common pathophysiological mechanism that links all of these different kind of provocative agents, whether it's in the germline or in the environment, to cause cancer? And we figured that we did. We solved that problem. We showed that every one of those risk factors disrupts energy metabolism, respiratory energy metabolism in the mitochondria, leading to allowing a compensatory shift in how that cell gets energy. And that shift is associated with dysregulated cell growth because the organelle, the mitochondria, that controls the differentiated state of the cell is corrupted, and the cell falls back on its default state, which is proliferation. So we know pretty clearly what the hell is going on with cancer. So then when I say compensatory fermentation, what the hell does that mean? Okay, that we found out the only two fuels that can be fermented, that's generating energy without oxygen, is the sugar glucose and the amino acid glutamine, and they're powerfully synergistic with each other. You have to take both of them away together to crush down the energy metabolism in these cancer cells. You got to realize that without energy, nothing can grow. You and I can't live without it. We breathe air. Air has oxygen. Oxygen fuels the combustibility of fuels in our body. Okay. And we do it very efficiently. But the cancer cell it takes in oxygen, but does not use it for ATP. Okay. It makes these radicals and causes the mutations in the nucleus that everybody is focusing on is downstream effects of the damage to oxidative phosphorylation. That's one of the major reasons why we're not making any advances. But once you realize what the tumor cell needs to survive, and clearly we have interrogated these tumor cells to know exactly what they can and cannot use, it becomes clear how to manage them. You just pull the plug. Now, on the two fuels that are driving the dysregulated growth, and you transition the whole body over to fatty acids and ketone bodies, which the normal cells can use, but the tumor cells can't. Therefore, they become checkmated and die, okay, without toxicity. So people say, wow, this greatly I said it's not that complicated. Once you understand the players and what the theory and understanding what cancer is not that complicated of a disease. We have made it a monster by chasing genes that are largely irrelevant. Their downstream effects. So we created a monster by our lack of understanding of the biology of the problem.
Who's we, though? I mean, I'm curious to dig deeper into where this where this belief that genetic mutation was the leading cause of cancer, and why your information isn't abundantly known around the world and how we're treating cancer. Like, where's the miscommunication that happened that for decades that we thought it was around genetic mutation in your belief?
Well, I mean, it was started with Otto Warburg. I mean, I'm just standing on the shoulders of Otto Warburg. He received the Nobel Prize in the 1930s for his work on the respiratory enzymes in normal cells. And he was the one who said there's something wrong with the mitochondria in these cancer cells. And he said the cells have to switch to an ancient fermentation. Fermentation happens in the absence of oxygen. So like if we run fast, our muscles generate energy through a fermentation and we throw out lactic acid. If we run really, really fast, and some of our cells are capable of doing this. If we have stopped breathing or have a heart attack, we stop getting oxygen into the body, and we see the markers, and we have to, well, then if we, why are we not dead instantly? If you take cyanide, that causes a permanent shutdown of oxidative phosphorylation, a permanent. You can't, even if you put oxygen back into the patient, you've gummed up the oxidative phosphorylation machinery, and that's dead. There's nobody that drinks the Kool-Aid full of cyanide and walks away without any problem. You're dead. Okay. But if you have a heart attack, and you stop breathing for a certain period of time, if you don't get the oxygen back into the body, everybody knows the brain cells die and you die. But if you get the oxygen back into the body, the patient recovers. The individual recovers, based heart massages and all this stuff. Well, when he's unconscious there for those few minutes, the bloodstream fills up with lactic acid and succinic acid. Okay. Those are the biomarkers for energy without oxygen. We have switched our cells in our body to an alternative source of energy. Otherwise, we're going to be dead. So, but we can only do that for a few minutes, 5 minutes at the most, and then we die. If we get oxygen back, we live. Now, those biomarkers, which is lactic acid and succinic acid, that would fill up from a heart attack or from stopping breathing or whatever, we see those same biomarkers in cancer cells in the presence of 100% oxygen. They shouldn't be fermenting and using that if they have a good mitochondria oxidative phosphorylation. So the cancer cells have been telling us for decades, we're fermenting, and this is the way I'm living. Without energy, I can't live. Where am I getting my energy? I'm getting it from a non-oxidative source. What is that source? It's a fermentation. What does that mean? It means energy without oxygen. And the cancer cells are just doing what our cells evolved to do. Don't forget, all of our cells in our body have the remnants, heirloom pathways that are there from 2.5 billion years ago. All of the cells on the planet were fermenters. They had no oxygen in the atmosphere, yet they were dividing in an uncontrolled way, driven by fermentation. Cancer cells are falling back on these ancient heirloomic pathways and allowing them to continue to grow. And they will grow as long as you got that fuel, as long as those fuels are there. So now you know that, so the cancer cells continue to ferment in the presence of 100% oxygen. Wow, that's what Warburg said. But Warburg was thrown under the bus because there was some misunderstanding. The field of biochemistry and biology said, cancer cells take in plenty of oxygen, therefore their oxidative phosphorylation must be fine. And we have shown that oxygen is not used for energy. It's used for other things besides energy. So that was a big misunderstanding. So there was so much confusion in the biochemistry area. Warburg did not know about the fermentation of an amino acid glutamine, which caused misunderstandings. Warburg did not know that the oxygen consumed by a cancer cell is not linked to ATP synthesis through oxidative phosphorylation. But he was right in saying that the origin of cancer was mitochondrial dysfunction. He was 100% correct on that. But the field felt in the 1950s, when Watson and Crick came out with the structure of DNA, the entire field of biology ran off, rightly so, chasing genetic genes expression. And then when you started to look at cancer cells, you said, look at the broken chromosomes. Look at all the mutations in cancer cells. Genetics. And then we invested billions of dollars into the Cancer Genome Project, hunting for the mutations that are supposed to cause cancer. Now, there are some powerful experiments to say that those mutations cannot be the cause of cancer. We're now finding some cancers that have no mutations. Okay, well, people can argue, well, maybe we didn't look hard enough. Okay, well, it's still not consistent with your somatic mutation theory. If I use the same technique and I see thousands of mutations in some cancer cells and no mutations in the other using the same technique, something is strange here. The other thing, too, is when you take the nucleus of the tumor cell and put it into a normal cytoplasm, you no longer get dysregulated cell growth. So they said, there's something in the cytoplasm that suppresses dysregulated cell growth. On the other hand, if I take the tumor nucleus and put it in the cytoplasm I take the normal nucleus, the nucleus from a normal cell, and put it into the cytoplasm of a tumor cell, I get dysregulated cell growth. Wow. Okay, this completely throws that you can't be a genetic. It cannot be a disease driven by nuclear genes. Okay. And then they said, but only some genes, only some cause cancer. And we're going to label them drivers as opposed to passengers. So the massive field of cancer genetics started to refine what they said and said, well, not all mutations cause dysregulated cell growth, only real bad ones. And we call those drivers. New information is now coming out of the scientific literature showing that you, a young guy, you don't look like you have cancer, but if we do a genetic screen on some of your tissues, oh my God, you're full of driver mutations, but I don't have any cancer. You put all that together and you have to be you have to, I don't know if lack knowledge, you have to be an ideologue. You either have to be have some intellectual challenge, cognitively challenged, or an ideologue to think that cancer is a genetic disease. However, if you've built your entire career and being a big dog in this field and thinking you know what you're talking about, and you're the head of some medical school department, you just can't accept what I just said. Are you kidding me? I mean, the whole field is driven by the targeted genes, a multi-billion-dollar industry. You're telling me this might not be correct? You're absolutely right. We got 1,700 people a day telling us that it's not correct. And the cancer cells are telling us what we should be doing, and we're not doing it. So you tell me what the problem is.
You must not be very popular amongst those circles, I imagine.
I don't know whether I'm popular or not. It doesn't make any difference. We got 1,700 people a day dying, and who cares whether I'm popular or not? What are we going to do to help those poor souls?
Let's simplify this for the audience. So maybe people have some understanding of the differences between mitochondrial dysfunction versus genetic mutation. What's the actual lesson here for people? If, assuming the mitochondrial dysfunction is the primary cause of cancer, what does this mean for those people that are trying to prevent cancer or people that already have cancer? What changes should they be making based on this information to get to their goal?
Well, you have two different things here. You have prevention and then you have treatment. So you have to say, well, what do I need to do to prevent cancer? Cancer is very, very rare in normal mitochondria. We haven't found any tumor yet that has normal mitochondria. So one way to prevent cancer is keep your mitochondria healthy. Okay. But the problem is, to do that, people don't want to do that. Okay, they don't want to change their diet and lifestyle and exposure to chemicals. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do. Our ancestors rarely had cancer. How do we know that? Because when I say our ancestors, I'm talking about our Paleolithic ancestors from several 100,000 years ago. All right, these guys were hunter-gatherers. They had a lot of exercise. They tracked down, killed big animals, and they ate a lot of meat. Ate whatever they were omnivorous. So we had tremendous amounts of exercise. We had foods that we ate were no highly processed carbohydrates. You have a very different diet and lifestyle. People say, well, how do you know what those guys did? Because we have certain populations of people on the planet that live according to their traditional ways. And they rarely have cancer. How do you know that? Because Albert Schweitzer documented this, a physician, humanitarian. He went into these primitive tribes in Africa and he was shocked. Couldn't find anybody with cancer. And yet,
nobody.
No, he looked at 40,000 people. 40. We have. I don't know if he found one or two. There are certain kinds of. There was one kind of Burkitt's lymphoma, which came from a parasite infection. It was initiated by parasites, but the parasites damage oxidative phosphorylation, leading to dysregulated cell growth. So you can predict how these tumors are happening, but the incidence was rare. It was very much less common than what you saw in industrialized societies. As a matter of fact, in England, in Wales, in 1865. Cancer was not the number one killer of the population. It was tuberculosis and some viral infections and things like this. And then the same group of people studied in the early 2000s, I believe. I have the data here somewhere. Cancer was jumped really high, and much less tuberculosis and these other things. So cancer incidence is going up with industrialized societies, and it's happening all over the world. And all of those industrialized societies have less exercise. We're eating large amounts of highly processed carbohydrates, which never existed in our past. We have a lot of emotional stress, poor sleep. We're putting all of the packages together that our ancestors had much less. When I say ancestors, our primitive ancestors. So we're putting ourselves at risk with the diet and lifestyles that we have. And that's not mysterious. The obesity epidemic, as I said, obesity is now a risk factor replacing smoking, okay? Obesity is linked to type 2 diabetes and systemic inflammation, which will damage oxidative phosphorylation. Obesity is evolution in action. Our ancestors were never obese. There was nothing they could eat to make them obese. They're chasing down big animals. There's no carbohydrates. They have good sleep. So it's a very, very different lifestyle. The people that are obese today are the descendants of our ancestors that survived. Our bodies are so geared for storing energy because otherwise we would have been exterminated, we would have been extinct. We would have gone extinct as a species if we were not able to store energy. So we are supremely designed physiologically to store energy. All of a sudden, within a few hundred years, we're in an environment strikingly different from the environment in which we rose. So our biology is not evolving as fast as our technology. Therefore, we have an obesity epidemic. We have all these chronic diseases, and they're cancer caused. Many of them cause cancer.
What about the argument that our ancestors in the Paleolithic, even in the Neolithic era, that didn't necessarily survive past a certain age? So people just were, in general, were dying a lot earlier because of various reasons, lack of antibiotics and so forth, and even didn't really have much to track whether they had cancer or not. And this day and age, we have certain cures that exist, like that would normally have killed us before, and people are just in general living longer because of the advancements of science and technology. And we're getting better at measuring cancer rates just because of the data world that we live in. Are there any truth to that, where just in general people weren't living as long and that's why they may not have had cancer?
Well, let's break it down and let's think about it a little bit more. What killed most of those people in those days? They didn't live as long. Yeah, you're right. They died from infections and injuries. There wasn't orthopedic surgeons to fix a broken hip, replace a knee. So those poor guys that had to track down and kill animals are not going to be so effective at that, right? So think about it. Injuries and infections were the major cause of death of our ancestors because they didn't have antibiotics. They didn't have the medical advances in keeping us alive longer, so they would die for sure earlier. The wolf is the same. Okay, the wolf dies in the wild from injuries and infections. All right, all of our domestic dogs arose from the wolf, right? So cancer is the number one killer of domestic dogs. You ever see how obese these dogs are? They're eating the same crap food that we're eating, and they're all getting cancer. They're not dying from injuries and infections because we're taking care of them at the vet. They're dying from cancer because we're in a new diet and lifestyle issue. And the primitive tribes that live according to their traditional ways, yes, we can have antibiotics for these folks, but they're all very active. They're all eating natural kinds of foods. And what's more, we're seeing cancer now exploding in younger numbers. I can't tell you how many people in their late 20s and 30s and early 40s are having cancer. This is the same age bracket as our ancestors. So when you break it down, it was diet and lifestyle, baby. There's no other explanation. We're in toxic environments. We're eating the wrong foods. We're not exercising. We're all freaked out, sitting in traffic. I mean, you can put it all together, and you got not only cancer, you have type 2 diabetes, you cardiovascular disease, you have dementia. I mean, let's put it all together here. And most of the chronic diseases are coming from a rapid advance in technology, and our biology has not yet caught up with that. And it would probably take centuries, thousands and thousands of years for our biology to catch up to our new environment.
Yeah, you've previously talked about a study where you compared the Inuit diet from using two groups, where one will have the traditional diet of what those people would normally eat, and then another group of Inuits that had the Western diet, and you kind of compare the differences of cancer rates. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't do that, but I spoke to the folks that were involved in that in some way. I gave a lecture at the medical school in Thunder Bay, Canada. There's a medical school there that services the Inuit population of Canada. Okay, so yes, traditionally the Inuits were a hardy group. They lived in obviously the Arctic Circle area. Their main diet was seals and whales and fish and these kinds of things. They had to expend tremendous amounts of energy to kill and eat these animals. Fruits and vegetables were minimal. They would be collected during the warmer seasons and stored, but still not a major dietary input for those folks. Once the Inuits then adapted the diet and lifestyle of Western ways, they now have some of the most obese people. They have the highest cardiovascular and cancer rates among members of the Canadian population. So clearly, and this happened in our own Native American populations in the United States. Some of the Pueblo Indians in the diabetes was not heard of. When they did a big study in 1901, I think it was the Pueblos, one of those Indian tribes in our Western area. They didn't even know what diabetes was. And now diabetes is like more than 50% of the population. As soon as the great American diet and lifestyle enters into your society, brace yourself, baby. Heart attack, cancer, dementia, all of these kinds of chronic diseases. It comes from diet and lifestyle. And, okay, there might be a few genetic risk factors, predisposing risk factors, but they're not the main. So it's mostly diet, lifestyle, and exposure to chemical carcinogens and other toxins in the environment. That's it. You want to prevent that? Okay, change your diet and lifestyle. Guess what? Nobody wants to do that. Not nobody, but certainly you get a lot of people that say, "Oh man, don't you have any?" I mean, look at the obesity thing. This drug comes out, Ozempic. You shoot yourself up with Ozempic. Oh, you don't feel hungry anymore. You lose weight. It's either that or do water-only fasting. What are you going to choose? Give me the drug. It's human nature. We put ourselves at risk because of our own desire to have quick fixes for very complicated or lifestyle changes that may not be as comfortable as people would like.
Yeah, so if you're saying the primary cause of cancer is mitochondrial health, and the way to keep mitochondrial health, diet and lifestyle is such a big factor to that. Talk to me about that specifically. What is the right diet to have based on your research, and how can people implement that?
Well, what's the right diet? You got a guy who's a vegan, a guy a vegetarian, a pescatarian, a carnivore, a Mediterranean. You can be healthy on all those things. As long as you're in nutritional ketosis, because that's how we evolved. We evolved as a species. What does nutritional ketosis mean? It means that you don't have a lot of blood sugar because you didn't eat anything that would give you, unless you had type 1 diabetes, and that's a different ball game altogether, where you don't make enough insulin because of a virus or a genetic problem, and therefore you have you can have very high blood sugars. You produce massive amounts of ketones. But our normal physiological state is naturally therapeutic ketosis. I should say nutritional ketosis. So that means the ratio of blood sugar to ketone, the ketone bodies are coming from the mobilization of fat. So everybody knows what fat is. We all have some level of fat in our body. Okay, when we stop eating fuels, sugar primarily, or anything, and we take those adipocytes that have triglyceride fatty acids, they go into the bloodstream, they go right to our liver, and our liver, it's like putting a branch in a wood chipper. You chop up the fatty acids into these water-soluble ketone bodies, which now circulate in our blood. They go right to the brain's sucking those things out, the heart will take them, and we have fatty acids that the muscles and heart will burn. And we can get tremendous amounts of energy from these fuels as long as the mitochondria are healthy. If the mitochondria are not healthy, we can't use those fuels. As a matter of fact, in the tumor cells, you find them storing these lipid drops in the cytoplasm. They can't burn them because the machine to burn them, the engine to burn them, is broken. So they store in the cytoplasm. So keeping your mitochondria healthy in normal cells that are not cancer means shifting energy from carbohydrate to fat. And the ketone bodies are, not only that, when our mitochondria burn ketone bodies, they actually reduce the amount of reactive oxygen species. They become super energetically efficient. As a matter of fact, when we burn ketones, we get more, each breath of air we take in, we get more power-driven energy when you burn ketones than when you burn carbohydrate. And this is a bioenergetic principle that was worked out by my late colleague, Dr. Richard Veitch, head of the metabolism branch at the National Institutes of Health. He worked out, him and Krebs of the Krebs cycle, they worked out the bioenergetic efficiency of ketone bodies. And our ancestors were generally on these ketones, had some level of ketone body all the time because we were eating carbohydrates. And you say to yourself, well, that keeps your mitochondria healthy. That keeps you reduced from cardiovascular disease. All that will be reduced significantly if your mitochondria are doing that. So what diet? The answer is we don't know. All I know is we develop a glucose ketone index calculator, which measures the ratio of glucose to ketones in the blood. And for cancer management, we go 2.0 or below. But for nutritional ketosis, you can probably do 6 or 7 or below that number. That's the ratio of glucose. So a person in most of our society, they would have a GKI of 50 to 60, which means
wow.
Glucose
is a change.
Glucose is super high in our bloodstream, and ketones are super low. Okay, so as you stop eating carbohydrates and do more and more exercise, all of a sudden the glucose comes down and the ketones start going up. And when you have that ratio that's coming closer to unity, you are now into the zone that our great ancestors, our long lost ancestors were. The problem is you're not eating the foods that you're not going out and killing the deer on the end of the street or trying to track down some elephant and throw and cut it up and eat it. But we have meats that we call organic free range chickens. Don't forget, our ancestors killed and ate anything. We're omnivorous. Anything that we could walk, crawl, flew, grew, we would be able to prepare it for food. So people always ask me, what can I eat? What diet? I don't know. I said, why don't you experiment on yourself and find out? I says, go eat bananas and see what it does to your GKI. If the GKI is too high, don't eat the damn banana. It's not that kind. Everybody says, he didn't say what I should eat. I said, eat what you normally eat, measure your GKI, and if it's still high, don't eat that. It's not, and everybody's different. Some people I can't eat meat. Okay, then do it on plants and see what the plants will do for you. The guy says, I can never eat a plant. Just eat carb. Everybody says, what can I eat? I don't know, for Christ's sake. Just measure your GKI and see what you can eat or not eat.
Yeah, based on your interviews, I actually thought you were going to push keto pretty hard in this interview. Because I know keto, some people, I've tried keto. I think it affects people differently. Like there's even a study on Nature Medicine that talked about how certain people on keto, can have increase in LDL, and it has been shown to increase heart disease for some people, but it may work for others.
If you sit down in front of a tub of lard and eat the damn lard all day long, you'll get your ketones up, but you'll also put your body at super risk. People are fools, many of them. They just go out of their mind thinking, this is important, I got to do this. They have no clue about the bioenergetics or how to do it correctly. And that's what gets me frustrated, is that all these people say, you said keto. What the hell? Just drink water. You can get into ketones. You can get the same level. I don't want to do that. Okay, well, then what do you want to do? I want to eat this. Okay, see what it does to your GKI. If you're in ketosis, doesn't make a difference what you're eating. So people can do it if they're on a carnivore diet, a vegetarian diet, pescatarian diet, Mediterranean diet. So say, I tried this Mediterranean diet, but I wasn't able to. Well, eat less of it, for crying out loud. If you want to see it, just then drink water for a week. You'll definitely be down there. I can't do that. Well, then what the hell are you talking about then? You have no clue what you're doing. So if you're in nutritional ketosis, you will get healthy. There's no question about it. But if you're sitting in front of a tub of lard to raise your ketone bodies, it's all going to raise your glucose too, like we showed. You're going to be at health risk. So people who say all that stuff don't know what the hell they're doing or how to do it. Nutritional ketosis is a natural state that our bodies were designed to live in. Okay, that's the way. What can I eat? I don't know. Everybody has to try it. It has to be religiously appropriate, culturally appropriate, and restricted in the amount that will put you into that, because our ancestors, and we also we would gorge on these feasts. This is how we got Christmas, New Year, all these different kinds of feasts, because we had an opportunity to gorge ourselves. But what were we gorging on? Meat? A lot of meat, right? I don't know anybody who would sit down and eat like 4 bushels of broccoli. You mean you would gorge yourself, but the foods that we eat were low glycemic foods. Don't forget, we engineered, this is part of our technology. We engineered fruits and vegetables to be higher in sugar. I remember when I was at the University of Illinois, my member of my committee, the late John Lawnon, he discovered the sugary four locus to make sweet corn. Okay, sweet. Boy, you ever have sweet corn? It's delicious, because it has more sugar in it. But our teosinte, the ancestral corn, didn't have that. So they would pound it up and make some tortilla breads and things like this. But they were still many complex carbs. They weren't highly processed carbs. So all of this comes into the realization of what you're eating, how you're eating it, and what it does to your nutritional state. So I don't push ketogenic diets. I push nutritional ketosis, which can happen from any kind of a diet, as long as you eat the amount of it and measure the glucose ketone index. You can get the meter from Amazon now. And now we're getting apps that you can follow your GKI on your cell phone. And then you'll know, and then you'll start getting healthier and healthier and skip meals. How does it feel to skip 2 or 3 meals? Maybe 1 meal a day. Make sure you get a lot of exercise in. Oh, I don't have time. People say, I don't have time to exercise. I'm sitting in traffic. Well, that's your personal misfortune. Our ancestors weren't sitting in traffic. They were chasing down and killing animals, So, and that's part of our diet and lifestyle. We're stuck in this environment that keeps us in an unhealthy state, and we're suffering for it. But the answer is to keep yourself cancer free or significantly reduce the risk, not only of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, dementia. You have to keep your mitochondria health. And I'm sorry to say, our great American diet and lifestyle is not part of that's not helping us. It's not helping us. But as long as people know that, then they become more scientifically literate.
Got it. So you're not necessarily advocating, as I mentioned, for like a keto-only diet, but as a rule, as kind of a guidance, it's likely going to be, avoid the simple carbs, sugar, any of that stuff. Try to eat more low-carb diet, if not, complex carbs. Stick to that. Seems to be like a general rule.
Yeah, well, just measure your GKI. That'll tell you if people are serious.
How do they measure that? Because unless if you have a glucose monitor, do you recommend people having like one of those CGMs, continuous glucose monitors?
Well, that certainly can be part of this. The problem is that does not measure blood ketone bodies. So you measure blood ketone bodies by a urine strip, but that's not accurate either. It's not precise. When we do the glucose ketone index in the blood, we take a drop of blood like a person with diabetes would do, and they take a little a stick, a sensor stick. The drop of blood hits the stick. You put the stick into the machine, and you wait a couple of seconds, and then it reads the blood sugar level in milligrams per deciliter. And then you have to convert that. You have to convert that to millimolar. People say, "Oh, what do I do?" But the Keto Mojo now has made it all easy. You don't even have to do the division anymore. So you take another stick that measures ketone. You squeeze your finger a little bit more, get another drop of blood, and put the ketone stick there, and put the stick into the meter, and then push the button, and then it gives you the amount of ketone in that drop of blood. Beta hydroxybutyrate is the ketone body that it's measuring predominantly. And then you push the button on the meter, and it gives you the ratio it converts the glucose to millimolar, and then gives you the ratio of the two fuels. And that can tell you right there. So it's, and the meter, I think, is only like $40, $40 or $50.
What's it called again? Keto Mojo?
Keto Mojo. I don't know if there might be others out there that can do. There's other meters, as far as I know. Precision Extra. The problem is you have to do the division. I don't know if they've incorporated the calculator into the meter. Keto Mojo has done that. We developed. Now we couldn't patent any of this stuff. We didn't make a nickel on any of this stuff. But the guys putting it as the meter are making plenty of money. So anyway, Keto Mojo on Amazon. And you can buy it. It has all the equipment there, and it tells you what your GKI is. So if people want to know what diet they should try, that's fine. Try whatever diet you like, eat whatever you like, just measure your GKI. And if I told you that you need to get below 10 to be in somewhat level of nutritional ketosis, below 6 would be great. If you have cancer, below 2 is better, because then you start hammering and killing the tumor cells. There's nutritional ketosis, and then there's therapeutic ketosis. Therapeutic ketosis is a level lower, so you're really pushing those sugars down. Then you go out and exercise significantly, and that also takes the sugar out of the blood. It's taking the sugar out of the blood, further pushing those sugars down. Brain takes most of the glucose, not the tumor. But if you have very high levels of sugar, the tumor is fat and happy, getting all the sugar it needs, growing like crazy, or continuing to grow. But you want to keep your mitochondria healthy. So let's say you have no cancer, you just want to make sure you don't get cancer. Then occasionally you put yourself into these ketonic states. Skip a meal or two, do exercise. Eat foods that are low in carbohydrates, like meat and things like. There's some vegetables that are low glycemic vegetables. Low glycemic fruit is grapefruit. Okay, so we did this when I worked in the epilepsy field. We had to monitor blood sugars in these pediatric epilepsy kids, and grapefruit would give you plenty of vitamin C without jacking your blood sugar up. So all of these things have to be recognized, and it's just not sitting down in front of a tub of lard and eating this and saying, "Oh, I got cardiovascular disease." They smashed that lard on that guy's head. He has no clue what the hell he's doing. So bury his face in there. I mean, you got to have a few functional brain cells if you want to know what to do. And that's why I call scientific literacy is absolutely essential. And unfortunately, that seems to be on short supply for people in most parts of the world, I would say.
Yeah. So we covered diet. You mentioned skipping meals. So talk to me about fasting, and particularly around the differences between the effects of our glucose, at least related to cancer, between intermittent fasting versus prolonged fasting. How effective is intermittent fasting? Because I understand there's not a lot of high quality randomized clinical trials around humans sharing about how intermittent fasting can actually affect cancer. I know there's done in mice, maybe pigs. What are the effects of intermittent fasting versus prolonged fasting based on studies we found?
Well, don't forget, we evolved in both of those states. We would intermittently fast between feasts, between big kills. You think how hard it was for our ancestors to kill a buffalo or a deer or an elephant. You're not going to run out and do that every single day. You're trying to store the meat as long as you can, and whatever tuber or vegetable you might have, you're going to be doing that. And you're not eating 3 meals a day. You might be nibbling on things here and there, but then under long fast, this is how we evolved. We evolved to do long fasts. There were times when we would have to go weeks without food. And people say, "Well, you'll be dead." No, you won't. My good friend, colleague, George Cahill from the Joslin Diabetes Center, they did long-term fasting on people. They have the longest guy who fasted was Angus Barberry from Scotland. He went 377 days without eating. Now he was morbidly obese, but he did. And it's documented. It's in the scientific literature. You can read about him. He lost, I don't know, several hundred pounds over a year. Over a year of not eating. George had one guy six months without food, just drinking water. And he lost his job. He was a postman, got too fat, couldn't deliver the mail. Wow. Went on, and they put him on this special water-only diet for 6 months. Of course, you take some vitamin supplements, but not many, because we store vitamins in our fat. We have a lot of fat and we store them in the liver and with minerals in the bone. Our bodies are supremely designed to function without food for long periods of time. However, skinny people, I wouldn't say called skinny, I should say normal weight people, we have in the blood, you'll notice that when you fasting, we call therapeutic fasting, but prolonged therapeutic fasting will slowly drift into what we call starvation. Therapeutic fasting is healthy. Starvation is pathological. You start then dissolving muscle tissue. You should never, fat spares muscle. Fat is a way to keep our muscles and proteins there. We spare the proteins by burning the fat. When the fat starts to dissipate, now we have to attack the protein. That puts us at risk for starvation. Starvation is a pathological state, and we don't ever want to get to that state. And when you know that, you can start seeing amino acids rising in your blood because you're breaking down protein now. But that's like to do that, you have to go like maybe 50 or 60 days of water only. And people say, well, that's crazy. Of course it's crazy. You're starving. You're going into starvation. But we're now it's very hard to go cold turkey on this whole thing. So when I say that means, I'm going to eat a big meal today, and I think I'm not going to eat any food for the next 3 or 4 days, just drink water. Your body is going to have a tremendous reaction against this, okay? Because our brains are glucose addicted. It's like a cocaine, nicotine. It has a powerful addictive effect on our behavior. You can do 24 hours. You start drifting into 48 hours, and you start getting cranky and upset. And then the third day, you're miserable. You're saying, well, I don't want to do this. Okay. So, and they say, well, most people drop it. They can't do it anymore. I say, well, this is too dramatic. But what we do for the cancer people, my physician colleagues, is that we have to transition the cancer patient away from glucose to ketones. So what we do is slowly transition that person into a zero carbohydrate, very low carbohydrate diet. Your body starts to acclimate to the fact of sugar not being there, but we're not depriving you of calories. So the calories will subserve a lot of the functions, but we're taking the craving of glucose, breaking it down. Then once you get into the low GKI, you can jump into water-only fasting without any traumatic problems to your body. You've already become adapted to this, and it's not so dramatic change. So again, it's the adaptation of taking advantage of the flexibility of our physiological systems to do this naturally. Our Paleolithic ancestors had no choice. They didn't become glucose addicted only because there was no high glucose foods in the environment to make them glucose addicted. They were always in ketosis. Now, did they want to be there? Of course not. If you gave them a big pizza and a chalupa or some of these things, I mean, they pound it down like they'd see no tomorrow. They'd be killing each other for this stuff. But because they say, oh, this is a miracle. My brain is like beautiful, feel great. But now we're stuck in an environment where we have all this stuff 24/7 at our hands, and we're putting ourselves at risk for all this kind of stuff.
The question is like,
science. You have to know physiology and biochemistry, unfortunately, and most important, evolutionary biology. And these, unfortunately, are the subjects that a lot of people don't know or don't understand.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any research based on what's the average our ancestors would normally fast for between meals, because a lot of people, we know intermittent fasting has become this big trend where people are fasting for 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours, 20 hours. But I don't actually know if there's any effects when it comes to cancer. Meaning, is 12 hours or 14 hours actually enough to make some sort of a meaningful impact on cancer reduction versus prolonged fasting?
Well, I think you have to look at the glucose ketone index. I think some people take longer to reach a GKI of therapeutic ketosis than another person. And sex is different too. Women are much better at doing this than men. So I think that's because they carry more body fat. It was an evolutionary conserved adaptation for energy for the child, for childbearing. Men have more muscle because their job was to kill and get the food. Women store the energy better for childbearing. So there's sexual differences, gender differences in doing this as well. It's all based on our individual physiology. So the answer to your question is I don't know. And it would have to be on an individual basis. And maybe people who would want to study large numbers. I worked with some Chinese groups where they were looking at the effects of water-only fasting for a week. And another colleague, Isabella Cooper from London, is doing these kinds of studies. And what she's doing, she's putting patients into these states of therapeutic ketosis. She's doing a very kind of opposite study. It's very interesting. She'll take her subjects and bring them into a state of nutritional ketosis by intermittent fasting or longer fasting, and looking at all the blood biomarkers, her HDL, LDLs, all the different micronutrients, macronutrients, and seeing after a month or two in this state, now let them eat high carbohydrate diets and see how fast it knocks all of the markers out of normalcy by shifting from. It's almost like going from our Paleolithic state switching quickly to a Western diet state and see how fast it knocks out all of the parameters from what we call healthy zones. So it's just like the opposite of what other people do. But the answers to your questions are slowly coming from various kinds of controlled experiments and things like this. But everybody can do it themselves. Each person can be their own control in knowing it for themselves, what their bodies, how long it takes them to get into these zones. And then they have their own. They can't compare it with some other guy in a different country eating different foods. Do it with your own self. You have your control. I'm eating every day, whatever I eat, 3 meals a day, a lot of processed carbs. Okay, then let's switch your diet and see how long it takes you to enter into nutritional ketosis. Do intermittent, do a little extended. I don't know. Do whatever people want to do.
Yeah, it's got to be personal to you, right? That makes sense.
It's a personalized therapy.
So beyond lifestyle, diet, all that stuff, talk to me about treatments or supplements even. Metformin obviously is quite popular for people with diabetes, and it's meant to treat glucose. People are starting to take it now.
It doesn't work that way. It works through increasing oxidative stress in the tumor cell. Metformin, if you have a blood sugar of 320 milligrams per deciliter and you give metformin and bring it down to 110, you've brought your blood sugar down way. But that's to kill cancer cells. You got to get those blood sugars down much further than that. And metformin then interferes with that. So it's only, we did these studies. You start getting lactic acidosis. When you put people in, we did it in the mice. When you put the mice in fasted states and then give them metformin, they were getting sick from lactic acidosis. But metformin could be therapeutic by a mechanism not related to the glucose levels. They itself can cause oxidative stress in the cells, which can then kill them by oxidative stress, which is independent of glucose. So there's a lot of things that need to be known about that.
Yeah, I guess there's people that I would trust online that are taking that, but it's interesting to hear.
Well, you can take it. I mean, for type 2 diabetes, for sure, it'll lower your blood sugar. So will Ozempic. It just anything that will make you nauseated, you don't feel like eating, your blood sugar is going to go down, right? I mean, when you take a drug that says, "Oh man, I feel like I'm nauseated," well, you're not going to sit down and eat a nice. You don't feel like eating. So vagal nerve stimulation will do the same thing.
So you would say the same thing about Ozempic. It's not like going to prevent cancer.
Well, it
could because, right.
It could. It could definitely. I don't know what it might make your mitochondria. If you're elevating your blood ketone levels and lowering your blood sugar, it could be therapeutic. I haven't seen papers looking at GKI levels from people with Ozempic. But maybe it's out there. I just may not have seen it yet. But they're talking about it being a good against type 2 diabetes, which is metabolic in homeostasis. You're at a metabolic homeostasis with diabetes. You have too high of a blood sugar. Okay, you get sick, you get nauseated, you're not going to eat. Your blood sugar is going to go down. How complicated is that?
Got it. Makes sense. Whatever gets you to the goal, right?
Yeah. People would prefer Ozempic rather than doing water-only fasting. I'll tell you that much.
I agree. I 100% agree. Yeah. What about NAD precursors? There's people that talk about MNN or NR that can increase, or be positive effects to mitochondrial health, and you're saying mitochondrial dysfunction is causing cancer. So, is there any?
We're looking into some of that now. Yeah, we're looking into some of that now, but I can't be definitive because I don't have the outcomes of the experiments. Then it takes a long time.
Do you see it promising?
I don't know. I can't say that for sure because I haven't looked at all the data and we haven't done all the control experiments that need to be done. And maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. I don't know. But we're thinking about some of that, but we have no statement I can make one way or the other.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to say we're advocating it, but I don't know what's the downside of taking NR or MNM.
Measure your glucose ketone index and see what it does.
Yeah. That's the point of truth. We always go back to the GKI.
Yes. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
quantitative measure. It's a quantitative blood measure in you. So,
Yeah.
and let people know if it does something that in that regard. And if it doesn't, I don't know. Maybe it works through a placebo effect. Who knows? But
Awesome.
all this.
Well, I appreciate you, Professor Seyfried. I think this is such a fruitful conversation. Where can people find you? I know you have a book out that I want people to check out, which we'll link below, but it's called The
Well, make
Cancer as
sure
a
it's the right
Metabolic
book.
Disease.
Make sure it's the right book. Because I've written only one book, and yet on the web you'll see all these summaries of my work. I didn't do that.
I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah. I'll make
Okay.
sure it's the right book.
We try to purge those off the different sites because there's people that everybody wants to make a buck on somebody's. I wish I could do that. I wish I could make the money on these things like these other guys are doing. All of our research is supported by philanthropy and private foundations. So and what we do is when people make a nice donation and we publish our peer-reviewed scientific papers, we acknowledge the names of these people. So when you see our papers, and you can go online and you can put my name in, and you can see our open access papers, our press pulse, all the stuff that I've just told you is published. It's already published in the scientific literature. So people say, well, okay, well, how do I get acknowledged? Okay, well, you look this on the bottom of the papers, there's an acknowledgement section. And it acknowledges the foundations and the people that support our work. So when you see all these names, who the hell are all these people? Those are the people that are supporting the work that was done in that paper. And there's some people that say, I just want to be part of this paradigm change. It's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to be a worldwide shift in the way we view health and disease, especially related to cancer. And some people say, I just want to be part of the problem. In other words, I don't care if I make, somebody will say, I don't really care if I'm going to make $1 billion on what he's doing. I just want to know I was part of it. And it's going to happen. Yeah. There's no question, because we have the hard scientific evidence to support what we're saying. And this is based on bioenergetics. These are foundational principles of evolutionary biology and how cells work based on these chemical and energetic principles. And once you know how to wield the power of these things, you're going to get tremendous outcomes.
Yeah, well, I'm very hopeful and optimistic about where the future of cancer is going, because it's not been good so far. But I think conversations like this,
we can make a right angle change on that whole thing. But you said the powers in place, the confirmation bias, the dogmatic ideology, the threat to industries, all of these things will stand in the way until they can figure out how to become integrated into the new change.
Yes, sir. Yeah, very helpful. Well, I appreciate the conversation, Thomas. Professor Seyfried, appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Awesome. Thank you.